Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software Gray Tech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is Alan Pyle. He is the executive chairman of WaterFleet and is a leader in innovative water management solutions for industrial and construction sites. With over 2 decades of experience in engineering and project management, Alan is passionate about advancing sustainability through water reuse, recycling, and efficient resource management. His work is helping to redefine how the construction industry approaches water challenges, particularly in remote and high-risk environments. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to get to speak with you today.
Looking forward to it. So I always like to start with how you got into the industry to begin with. What's your origin story?
Yeah. So probably 12 years ago, I was really looking at, as an engineer and as a manufacturer in the world, kind of looking at where are some problem areas existing that are not being addressed appropriately, especially as it relates to water.
Mm-hmm.
That whole idea that clean, safe water is a basic human right is often applied to third world countries or to places where there's not much of a water supply. But the reality is, what I discovered is that in sometimes our own backyard, if you will, there are lots of very talented people working in very difficult conditions without access to a lot of clean water or even a proper restroom for that matter. And that happens to be in the construction world. It happens to be in the energy world. It happens to be in the emergency response world. And so I went about to create an opportunity to bring what I would call an interim remote utility to those spaces where we could make potable water and distribute it, drinking water and distribute it to those folks on those sites, to make restroom facilities available that were fully functioning and climate controlled, and then be able to capture the domestic waste that came out of those and put that back to an industrial reuse on the site to create a sustainability loop, if you will. A circular economy of water on those sites. And so that's what WaterFleet is today. We have a large inventory of mobile water and wastewater utilities that we can take out to these sites and become the interim utility for the site.
That's awesome. It's very cool stuff. I was mentioning to my wife what we were going to be talking about today, and she was like, "This is so cool. I can't wait to listen to it." She doesn't say that about all the episodes.
All right.
Yeah.
See,
we got the attention. That's right. So no pressure, but she will be listening to this episode.
Yeah.
So water conservation is really a key factor in sustainability, yet it can often be totally overlooked in construction, like you were kind of mentioning there. How can the industry really better prioritize water management as part of their sustainability efforts?
Yeah, good question, right? There's a lot of water used in construction, whether it's for road construction, dust suppression, cementing, right? And then there's just the whole water aspect related to the humans that are on that site, drinking water, toilet water, right? All those activities that are associated with humans.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, because it's a temporary situation, it's just treated as with a temporary solution. That is, bring water to the site, dispose of water in the most economical means possible, and not a lot of thought on the sustainability or the, if you will, the environmental social governance side of water use on a site. So, but there are a lot of opportunities actually for sustainability in water. And I think that the industry is shifting right towards looking for those opportunities more.
Yeah, for sure. So, sustainability is for sure becoming a greater priority in construction. How can construction sites really better incorporate the water reuse systems, and what opportunities do you see for job sites to help reduce their water footprint?
Yeah. So let me give you a little circular economy of water for a large industrial construction site. So water may be hauled into the site initially to be used for things like dust suppression and cementing, et cetera, when there's not a water supply available, especially during the initial phases of the construction. That water is then sprayed on the ground or used in the construction opportunities And that was some potable water that was brought from some fire hydrant, right, or some municipal supply nearby, and that water then goes away. In the meantime, trucks are coming on site to put water or water types into portable restrooms, porta-johns, if you will. That is then used, and then that's pumped and hauled away and has to go and be disposed of. And so what if we were able to take the well water that might be on that site that's been drilled to be used for a temporary purpose in the construction phase, take some portion of that, turn it into potable water, right, drinking quality water, distribute that into the office locations, distribute that out to the people for drinking water purposes, distribute that out to the portable restroom facilities that now can be fully flushing, functional restroom facilities, right? Then capture the waste that comes from that, process it on the site back to a reuse standard that is monitored and controlled, and given back to the site then for that dust suppression opportunity, for that cementing opportunity. So now we've taken water, we've recycled it basically twice. We've turned it into water that's usable for humans. Then we've taken what the humans did with it, and we turned it back into water that's usable for the industrial application.
Yeah, I love that. Love that full circle of it. So this may be a kind of an easy layup. What are some of the kind of most exciting innovations in water reuse and conservation that could help the construction industry minimize its environmental impact?
Yeah, well, I think that we come at it from a number of different pathways. So our mobile water treatment systems are able to take non-potable water, right, a well water that's not been registered for use for humans, or even a surface water in some cases, and through a pretty extensive treatment pathway inside of our mobile systems, we are able to bring that to a verified potable status. Potable just is a French word for drinking, right? It's drinking quality. So that water is fully capable of coming into contact with humans, to be drunk by humans, and to wash your hands with it, etc. So that bringing that level of technology down into a very mobile application was pretty unique in the industry, especially as it relates to creating that potable, verifiable potable water. There's a lot of mobile systems that can make industrial grade water for plant operations, et cetera, but to actually bring it to a drinking water status was kind of the big innovation. Equally, on the wastewater side then, being able to take that domestic waste that might be generated on those sites and turn that back into a verified reusable status in a mobile format that could be easily deployed to these sites, also pretty unheard of and not done before. And then there's just let's just talk about drinking water for a second, if you want to, Todd, because how is drinking water normally provided to construction sites, right? It's either the proverbial orange cooler that you fill up with water and ice, put a piece of tape around the lid so nobody can tamper with it, and distribute it all over the site for people to go up and push the little button and get a cup of water with. Or today, really a lot of migration towards bottled water, right? So 0.5-liter bottles of water in giant kind of open ice chests that have 500 bottles of water and 500 pounds of ice, as an example, distributed around the site, and then the worker just has to go grab that bottle of water. But if you think about a site with 1,000 workers, which is kind of minimal. We've seen sites 5,000 to 7,000, right, for big industrial applications. But 1,000 workers, each drinking 8 bottles of water per day, which equates to about a gallon of water, which is the normal kind of OSHA standard. That's 8,000 bottles of trash that just got created, right, and have to be dealt with. That water had to be transported to the site, had to be distributed around the site, had to have all of this ice associated with it that at the end of the day melts and gets drained on the ground. And then all those bottles and caps have to be collected as trash and moved away. What if we eliminated all of that in lieu of that potable water that we're already making on the site, and we put it into industrial water delivery kiosks? Think of it as a large industrial water cooler that you might see in your office, but able to deliver water for 50 or more workers per day into their own container. Bottle, transport, bottle itself, cap itself, all eliminated. The ice needed to chill the water, now eliminated in lieu of a very simple refrigeration system located all over the sites where the workers can get water from. That's a huge sustainability uplift for the site. And it's actually a great quality of life uplift for the workers as well, because it's much more convenient for them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it makes a ton of sense. Let's talk some scalability here, though. Are there some large scale projects that come to mind where water reuse has really been successfully implemented? And then what lessons can kind of the broader industry take from those examples?
Yeah. Well, when you just talk about the sheer gallons of reuse possibility, that certainly comes from the waste side. So
Mhm.
we are on a site that has seen as many as 7,000 workers per day at the site. Those 7,000 workers in fully functional restroom facilities generate 25 to 30,000 gallons of waste per day. Little known thing that people don't think about too much. That waste, we capture all of it. We convert it back into reusable water. We give it right back to the construction crew for their dust suppression trucks that are driving around, keeping the dust down on all of the gravel road, et cetera, on miles of space where construction is occurring. And that water then is 100% reused for that purpose. And that's 25 or 30,000 gallons of water that they did not have to bring in or otherwise find. So that's
Yeah,
pretty big, right?
it's
That's
huge.
big.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
for sure. For sure. So
Yep.
on industrial construction projects, they often occur in environments maybe with kind of extreme conditions or limited infrastructure.
Mhm.
What water related challenges do you think are most pressing in these types of projects, and how do we better address them?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's often true that when you start these construction sites, you're in a location that did not have utilities. There's a plan to get utilities to that site, obviously, for the permanent operation once the construction is finished. But sometimes that's years in the making.
Mhm.
And so if I'm now faced with the idea of having to haul in water from a local municipality, sometimes as far as 60 miles away or more, then that's a big environmental burden. That's a big cost burden. And then it's got to be handled at the site properly. Often, even if that water showed up to the site in a status that would be considered potable, it gets put into tanks and it's distributed in a way that loses its potability, right? And so I think those are in the early stages, especially of construction, this is one of the biggest issues that they face. Now, if they are able otherwise to bring in a water source that's not potable or a well that's on the site, and we can then process that to provide them the water that they need for potable purposes, right? For office supply, for the restroom facilities, for drinking water, that eliminates so much of that truck haul in or that need to try to find a potable source before that utility line gets there.
So I want to kind of double click into that because obviously, access to clean water and sanitation is essential
Yeah.
for health and productivity. How do you see the role of water infrastructure really in improving the day-to-day lives of workers on the job site?
Yeah. Well, when you don't have access to potable water, then you're literally kind of having to turn to the bottled water application for drinking water. You're having to use the portable toilet because you don't have water to provide to a flushing toilet, as an example, right? So I think that the worker, these folks, right, men and women, are highly paid, highly skilled workers working in an environment for literally years on a 12-hour shift, say, and they are subjected to, um, you know, um, limited quantities of water for drinking, bare essentials that are needed, and going to the restroom for half of their lives for 5 years in a portable toilet. That's a big effect on a very highly qualified, highly paid person. Why does it have to be that way? It doesn't, right? But we kind of go back to well, that's the way we've always done it, or that's the easy button for the procurement, right? To say, well, here, these are my vendors. This is where I go to get this. So bringing kind of this innovative way to look at it, frankly, sometimes simpler way to look at it, is always tricky. But I think that's that's where we can make the biggest difference.
So let's kind of drill into that. You hit on the kind of the way we've always done it
Mhm.
mentality aspect of it. What do you think the biggest misconception is that the people have around kind of water reuse, and why do they not look at it in really bringing that into their process?
Yeah. Well, cost, right? Always cost. There's a misconception that, oh, it's bound to cost more, right?
Mhm.
If I'm throwing anything like sustainability into the conversation, that's going to cost more. That's actually not true. It's not true at all, because when you take into account the transportation costs, right, and the distribution costs around the site, et cetera, those add up to be quite a lot. Frankly, dealing with all the trash associated with empty bottles of water are costs that aren't often taken into account, but are very, very impactful to the whole site. So cost is one. The other is, oh, it sounds too complicated, right? I've got this easy button that I push. These people show up with these porta cans. They drive around and empty them out and clean them. I've got a lot of very serious things I'm trying to solve on this side. I don't need that hassle. So I think complication or perceived complication is always key. Now, the way that we bring all of these services to the site is fully managed. So it actually reduces, not increases, the complication for the operators of the site to be able to have these kinds of services. So in the end of the day, it can definitely cost less. It can definitely be less complicated to the EPC or the construction firm in trying to deliver what ends up being a lift in the quality of life for their employees, which I always say should definitely improve productivity, which of course would be something that you would also want, right?
Yeah, for sure. So how do you get over the maybe the hurdle of educating people
Mhm.
of what the process actually is, and making it uncomplicated? How do you get over that hurdle to deal with the kind of the change management of the mindset?
Yeah. Yeah. It's always difficult, frankly. I mean, you have to communicate through all of the levels of, let's just take a big EPC as an example. You have to communicate through all of the levels. There are um, definitely management who are interested in sustainability, or interested in better quality of life for the people, or interested in providing a better um, offering for those folks that are working on that site. There's not enough of them to go around. So anything that you can do to get them to want to stay, retention with your company is important. And then there's HSE, right, and HR, who are very, very interested in making sure that people are taken care of, that they're meeting the OSHA standards, and that they're meeting their quotas for health and well-being of the people on the site. But at the end of the day, it is the people who are managing the site that are going to be the most difficult. And it's for those two reasons that I just gave you. They're concerned that they're going to bust their cost budget, and they're concerned that it's going to get complicated and they're going to have to manage. So we just have to work through that with them with examples of what it's looked like in the past. Here's um, testimonials from clients who have used it in the past, who can speak to the fact that it actually saved them money, that it was less complicated for them. We can give them examples of actual workers on the site who said, that's the best thing that's ever happened to us. Having this, look, I mean, drinking water is super important, and the convenience of it, and always at the right temperature, all those things are really important. But if I can go to the bathroom in a climate controlled environment that's fully flushable and it's convenient to me, and that's a game changer. And so I think being able to give testimonials around that helps those site people change their mind.
Yeah, it's the little things that mean the most,
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
sure. Where do you see the industry going in terms of water reuse over the next several years here?
Well, I'd say, since we've been doing this now on large industrial construction sites for 7 or 8 years, and the buyout is increasing by the day. And so I think adoption of solutions that allow for um, an ESG uplift, a sustainability uplift at the site is definitely increasing. There's high interest. I'm all about giving people proper water to drink, and sometimes the best way to do that's in a bottle. But in a lot of cases, because of the examples that I gave you earlier of what ends up being thousands upon thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of bottles per day that have to be dealt with, we get calls almost daily on how can I get rid of bottled water on my site. And it's just because of that. It's not because the product is inherently bad, or gives the workers a problem. It's a big hassle and it's a big cost.
Yeah. So kind of shifting into the emergency situation aspect
Yeah.
of it for water.
Yeah.
Obviously, water is, one of the first, if not the first, critical resource that's needed in an emergency. How can the construction industry prepare for these types of scenarios and ensuring rapid deployment of water solutions on the job site?
Yeah, very good question, right? So we do provide a lot of services into what I would call the emergency response world, whether it's hurricane response or whether it's fires. There's a lot of fires on the West Coast right now, and those are essentially camps of workers living in tents, looking for water to drink and looking for a place to go to the bathroom while they're fighting an intense fire. Same is true in hurricane response, trying to deal with the aftermath of a very difficult situation. So as it turns out, right, these large construction sites also are affected by these exact same things, mostly weather related. And they have to be able to prepare for how to deal with that site and that circumstance. And that's a construction site, but it's also the permanent site following that, right? People have to stay and maintain the operation of, say, a refinery or an LNG plant, something along those lines. And they need to have an emergency response plan. So our ability to bring those mobile systems in again helps solve that problem. It might be that the water supply in the area has gone on a boil water notice or has even got a low pressure situation or a no pressure situation. And we are able then to come in and be able to grab that source of water, turn it back into the verified potable source, and provide that utility to those people on that interim basis until all the services are restored.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's maybe one thing that you wish people knew about this whole world and concept that maybe they don't?
Yeah, well, that it actually is possible to create that circular economy, that there is a way with technology and with the proper service model that we can make water on a site, we can capture waste, we can give them back that opportunity to reuse that water. I think it's a very foreign concept in most construction environments right now. We're talking constantly. People are like, how do I get rid of this water? Or what do I do about my my test water for my pipe systems, et cetera, right? Always trying to figure out how to get rid of water that they're afraid has a problem, when instead we can just take that problem, solve it, and give them back that water for reuse on the site. I think that's very novel concept, and but catching on every day.
Mm-hmm. I love the solve the problem and give it back to them in a solution. That's awesome. What do you see as the next step in really the industrialization of the industry at large?
Yeah, well, as you know, there is a lot of large scale and construction going on in this country right now. It's very exciting, whether it's EV battery plants or data center operations or LNG plants, et cetera, car manufacturing. There's just so much going on right now. And that's really, really good, I think, for the country. And it's really, really good for the workers that are skilled that can provide those services to those construction sites. And as we're moving in these directions of what should be considered sustainability, right? Like, okay, I'm going to make an EV battery plant. I'm going to make batteries for cars to reduce the output of pollutants in the world. Then how can I make that construction site and that construction operation also less negatively impactful to the environment? That is something that we're seeing more and more of, especially when it's people like Microsoft or others that they're super conscious about what their environmental impact is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So we love innovation and the whole sustainability concept around here on Bridging the Gap. What do you think is maybe one of the biggest barriers or hurdles to bringing new innovative technology into the construction industry?
Yeah, well, I would go back to that there's a lack of understanding, which leads to a fear that it's too complicated. And so the biggest hurdle is education. How do we educate folks on the ease in which these kind of solutions can be put in place, the cost advantages associated with that, and the impact to the workers themselves? I just kind of go back to that as well. But adoption also comes from what's the feedback, right? What are my workers telling me about adoption of these kind of things? What are they telling me about why they don't want to stay on my site anymore? Why they want to move to a new and different site? And that's often what you'll hear. Like, hey, well, you pay me pretty well, but it's not a very friendly site for me to be on. I don't have a place to go eat lunch. It's difficult to get drinking water, or the restroom facility situation is just not acceptable. I hear there's other people on other sites that have it way better. So I'm thinking about going to that space. So I think at the end, feedback from the worker itself is going to be super critical to the general shift, right, towards these more sustainable, improved quality of life opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think feedback in the communication loop it's a powerful thing in a whole host of regards, especially when you're implementing something new and different. That feedback loop is critical.
There is one kind of new innovation that we're bringing into this location as well. Once we kind of solve that idea of like, can we do a better job of providing drinking water to the workers on the site through these industrial water delivery kiosks? Then we started to think, well, it's often a big concern for the health and safety people at those sites to know that their people are properly hydrated. Are they getting enough water? It's one thing to say OSHA demands that I provide enough drinking water at the right temperature to the site every day, and I can check that box. But do I really know if my guys are drinking it right? If my workers are drinking it, and how much? And of course, heat stroke and heat related illnesses on sites are a big problem. And when you're in the heat of the summer and you're outdoor and there's a lot of machinery around and everything, it's just a problem. So we have now implemented into our drinking water kiosks hydration tracking. And what that means is, your worker already has a badge that got them into the site and identifies who they are. We now can use that badge to activate the water delivery and measure the amount of water that worker, who we now have the ID for, took, and how often per day they took it, and measure that against climate or environmental information like the temperature and the humidity at the site, right? So now I can run some calculations, and that can learn, is that person getting enough water for the environment that they're in? And that information can be provided to HSE. So now imagine I'm a health and safety officer, and I'm sitting in the Oval offices, or frankly anywhere, and I'm looking at a bar graph of my workers and who is trending towards lack of hydration, right? Or who is properly hydrated, just by being able to track that. So I think that's another big innovator that's coming to the site that also should encourage the worker to drink more water, because they also can have access to the information that says, you're not drinking enough water, right? I'm moving towards a heat illness situation because of dehydration.
Yeah. I mean, I think on the personal side of things, I think having that information would be really valuable. I'm sure there are some, gray lines that you have to work through with the company having that and coming. But on the personal side, I think that's awesome. I love that, of being able to, hey, these conditions, maybe you should drink a little bit more, or, you're in good shape, you're in the green zone or whatever. Kind of the gamification of that is very cool. Awesome. So as we start to kind of land the plane here, a couple kind of rapid fire questions for you. First, what is the phrase modeling the future? What does that kind of bring up in your mind? What does that look like to you?
Yeah, we need to model ways for environments to understand the lack of clean, safe water in the world, the burden on municipalities around, especially around these large construction sites that we're doing, and we need to model that way into the future where we can handle that ourselves on our construction site instead of having to burden the environment around us. That's number one.
Love that. what about innovation? What does innovation mean to you?
Well, it's always about where is there a problem, and that problem has become a norm. Often what I would look at and go, that seems like a really big problem to me, to those people who have been involved, say, in the trees, right, for so long, consider it the norm. So breaking the barrier between something that would be considered normal and actually identifying as a problem and then bringing the solution to that problem. And often, it always has to be, it should cost less. It should be simpler.
How do people find out more information on WaterFleet and connect with you?
Yep. Waterfleet.com. And you're welcome to always contact me. I'm alan.r.pyle at waterfleet.com. And always happy to just talk about all of these issues, but and give you examples of how we've solved problems around the world.
Awesome. Simple enough. Well, final question for you. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing in the industry, what would you pick to innovate?
I think I have.
I like it.
I think I've picked what I would innovate. And that is, again, if I go back to the basics of clean, safe water is a basic human right, no matter how difficult the circumstances, and to say, hey, you guys are in a difficult circumstance, even though you're not in a third world country. Like, let's solve your problem. That's what I think that we've brought to the table. And I think that we can continue to expand on that and bring that to larger and even more complex situations, especially as the manufacturing world and the construction world and inside of the United States continues to grow.
Yeah, I love that. I love the passion that shines through as well too. So thanks for all that you're doing in this space and helping to bring sustainability into the construction industry even more.
You bet, Todd. We're happy to do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan, for joining the show today.